Just to give you an overview of Trailblazer, it was originally started well over 6 years ago, where we in the industry identified that we needed to have a qualification to prove the competencies of BEMS Controls engineers. There were professional courses which existed, but there was no specific apprenticeship. So the BCIA promoted the need for that, and then we put together an employer group as is required under IFATE, because if you are putting a new apprenticeship together, you need to have a cross-section of the industry to put forward the views and requirements of that. So we had major manufacturers, we had national companies, we had SMEs, which represented the whole profile of the industry. And then the work started, so that we had to agree as an employer group what were the knowledge, skills and behaviours required to be a competent BEMS Controls engineer. And we then had to come up with the duties and the descriptors of everything that would need to be delivered and assessed as part of that Trailblazer process. It took a number of years to go through that process. In February 2020, the Trailblazer was approved by IFATE, which then meant that government funding would be able to be drawn down to provide the training to the whole of the industry. So that was another significant element for the industry, because previously, to train all of our employees, we as businesses had to fund that training ourselves. But with the Trailblazer, you can then draw down funding through the training levy, which businesses are paying or a non-levy paying. So the key achievements to date of the Trailblazer was, first of all, getting it approved and a funding band allocated for the level 4 BEMS Controls Engineer Trailblazer. So that was the first stage. The next challenge, because we're a specialist sector, was getting a training provider to agree to run the program of delivery. And that sounds quite simple, but it was actually incredibly difficult, because from a training provider's point of view, it's a commercial decision. They had to ensure that there would be enough people coming forward to do that Trailblazer apprenticeship. We as an industry could give them an indicator of what we felt was the pent-up demand required for BEMS Controls engineers, but we couldn't actually prove it. And that was a real barrier. Also, COVID in 2020 was another barrier, and therefore it took us probably another 18 months, 2 years, to secure a training provider that was willing to take on that level 4 apprenticeship. And that's when Group Horizon came on board, and we've been able to work with them to launch the apprenticeship. And now I think we're probably at 10 cohorts and well over 200 starters on the program, with over 60 employers involved. And that is a huge achievement coming from nothing. The other challenges are, because we're a specialist, you've got to be able to deliver that program across the whole of the country, which logistically has been quite problematic. But we're now at a stage, we've got economies of scale now. The momentum is there, we've got far more people doing it, and therefore we'll be able to run courses in the north and in the south, whereas when you're first starting off, you don't have that ability to do that. So the next stage in the Trailblazer process is obviously to continue to attract more young people to take on the level 4 apprenticeship. So in order to do that, we need to continue to raise the profile of BEMS within the economy generally, because we need to feed in more young people at level 3 who can then lead into the level 4 BEMS Trailblazer. So that's why we're very much looking at the T level in building services engineering. So that's one strategy. In terms of the actual employer group and their role within the Trailblazer, that will continue, because first of all, we've got our first cohorts coming to endpoint assessment, and that will require input by the employer group to help the endpoint assessment organisation in terms of the content, the bank of questions. We'll also have a need for assessors to assess those endpoint assessments, and that is, again, a really important area. Then going forwards in 2025, the Level 4 apprenticeship will be up for review. And because it comes under the government's green apprenticeships, we will have to make sure that we review the content to ensure that we keep ahead of the game and that the content still remains relevant to the industry now and going forwards. For BCIA members, the Level 4 BEMS Controls Engineer Apprenticeship is really, really important because, as we know, for the past number of years, we haven't had a competency framework for BEMS Controls Engineers. We now have one. We need to make sure that we continue to support that, we continue to grow it because we need more and more skills into our sector. We also need to be conscious that under the Building Safety Act, there is a continuing requirement for a competency framework for every sector and every subsector within construction. And so we, as a member, need to make sure that the people who work for us have the competencies that the industry requires and that our businesses require.